Hi, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Humans of AI, where we are focusing on the humans behind the algorithms and trying to find out a little bit of their knowledge too. So, in this edition of the Humans of AI, I was lucky enough to interview Stephen Brown, who I know through the Starcraft Ai community. So, this is a bit of a long story about how Steve and I got to know each other. Way back in 2017 when DeepMind released the PySC2 Starcraft interface. We thought this was really, really cool, and went out of our way to try and build an AI competition around the PySC2 interface. The thing is, though, that never really came to fruition, probably for the best, because DeepMind sort of took StarCraft out of the park early this year. But one of the things we also realized at the time in 2017 was that there was no really sort of down to earth, well, not really down to, that's not quite the right word, but a course that sort of made reinforcement learning more approachable. And we thought we'd create this course to help aid the competition. So the competition never happened. But through that, we decided to make this RL course. It was a lot of hard work, a lot of hard work. But in the end, we got there. And I actually around late 2017, Stephen Brown released these amazing tutorials on Medium on how to write StarCraft bots in PySC2. So I reached out to him, and we got talking. And after a while, I found out that he lived in Australia. I was like, holy damn, you live in Australia? We should work together. And long story short, at the end of 2018, we ended up doing a GoFundMe because no one wanted to sponsor us. So we ended up did a GoFundMe. About 50 or so people funded about $10 each, and we flew him down to Sydney for one night where he gave us a lecture on PySC2. And that was the culmination of the Starcraft Ai Deep Reinforcement Learning course, which came out last Friday, I think. Came out last Friday. It was a lot of work to get that out. Myself and Stephen and Alex and Artem and William, we all put a lot of effort into making that course, and hope that the community can get something out of it. That's the Starcraft Ai Deep Reinforcement Learning course. You can find it at www.starai.io. And that's all one word. Okay, so this is a very fascinating interview with Stephen. He has quite an interesting background with regards to how he got started in machine learning, and also the career that he's on now. It's also fantastic hearing about what it was like to sort of experience firsthand what it's like to go to a Blizzcon, especially when they're announcing like a partnership with DeepMind with regards to some machine learning stuff. And he was on the ground floor when that happened. So, it's, if you want to hear that story, stay tuned because it's coming right up. See you soon. Hi, Stephen, and thanks for doing this on this fine Sunday afternoon on the Gold Coast,
No
Australia.
problem. Yep, nice and warm today.
It is very warm for winter, pretty much.
Yep.
2nd of June. Thank you very much for doing this. I've been wanting to actually potentially reach out to you to do this, and then the opportunity came up. So, yeah.
No, it's really good to do it. I think contributing to the community and talking about what we're doing is a really positive thing to give people. I like giving to the community, and I like being a part of that.
100%. 100%. Just for everyone that's listening, I know Stephen through our collaborative work. We did a little bit of stuff together last year on StarCraft. We tried to create we did create a course around reinforcement learning and trying to intro that to the in a different sense, like teaching through stories as opposed to maths. These principles. So I met Stephen through that community, and I've been wanting to talk to Stephen a while now about all the various things he's done with regards to StarCraft. Do you want to just formally introduce your work, what you've done there?
Sure. I mean, I think most people would probably know me from the PySC2 framework, which is the framework that DeepMind has developed for playing Starcraft 2. A lot of people would know that framework from Alphastar that beat a bunch of human players. And so I've been a fairly heavy contributor to that framework for a couple of years now. I wrote probably some of the first tutorials on how to use the framework, which is probably what got me most of my recognition, and actually got me invited over to Blizzcon in 2017.
Yeah, awesome. We'll hold that thought because we can talk about that.
Sure.
I'd love to hear about that actually.
Yep.
But speaking of which, those tutorials which you wrote are actually how I found out about you. Through those tutorials. I thought they were impressive because we're trying to do similar work ourselves.
Yep.
And then when we found out that you lived in Australia as well,
Pretty good.
It was pretty cool.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so first up, I'd like to know, this podcast is called The Humans of AI, and I would like to hear your story about how you got started in this field. What drew you to it? How did you get started?
Well, I've been a software engineer for like almost 20 years, I guess. So I was developing software in high school, and I started out, I think one of my first high school projects was a noughts and crosses game where I created an opponent that you couldn't win. You couldn't beat the opponent. You could draw against it, but you could never beat the opponent.
And this is in high school?
And this is in high school.
Yep.
And
what programming language was that?
I believe it was in BASIC.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that was really cool. And, that was kind of, it really had me excited. I'd worked with Duke Nukem 3D at the time, building levels and all that sort of stuff. And I just loved that game, and I thought it was awesome. And when I figured out that you could build levels for it, I was just thought, oh, this is awesome. Like, I can make something. It's creative. And then when I learned how to program, my brother was a couple of years ahead of me at school.
Yep.
I read his programming books. I was riding the bus to school and back. I was one of those nerds reading their computer programming books.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
So, I literally had like a book on Pascal that I read from cover to cover.
Awesome.
So I knew all the function calls and everything. And so, I sort of took that and went, wow, I can create these things. And I just loved making something that was interactive and, building that noughts and crosses game. And everyone was like, yeah, there's no way you can make something that can beat you every time, or you can't beat it. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, everybody tried it and nobody could beat it. So that was cool. But that's fairly easy sort of stuff, which is funny because one of the machine learning projects that I did recently was the same thing, but with machine learning. So seeing if it could learn how to beat me rather than me actually scripting it in.
Right.
So, at high school...
This thing we're talking about here is StarCraft related.
Well, it was really a test of... I wanted to test some algorithms, essentially. I wanted to see how the machine learning would work with something like noughts and crosses.
Yep.
It's obviously not the same. It's obviously highly simplified. It's probably closer to like a chess sort of thing. So, but there's some interesting things in there, like when you've got a noughts and crosses board, you can flip it and rotate it and transition it, and potentially the possible board scenarios is significantly reduced. Mm-hmm. So actually, the exploration space for something like that could be significantly reduced by that data manipulation going in. So, a lot of algorithms use that sort of stuff where you want to reduce the amount of variance in the data going in. And so I was just experimenting with that and seeing, because it took quite a lot, at least in my first test, it took quite a lot for it to learn effectively.
So right now we're talking about your StarCraft work, not the...
No, talking about the noughts and crosses.
We're still talking about noughts and crosses?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because...
So that's interesting to see that you're thinking about this sort of from a machine learning point of view, even back then.
Yeah, well, I built the noughts and crosses back then, and then when I started learning machine learning, I'm like, well, obviously I've got to go back and build my noughts and crosses thing and make it use machine learning instead of being a scripted solution like what I had.
Yeah, sure.
And it also is part of what I do. Obviously, with writing the tutorials, I want to create a simple scenario that shows the mechanics of what's happening and gives people some insight, not just into how the algorithm works. There are a lot of tutorials and courses and that out there that they go into a lot of detail about the mathematical side of things. They talk through the maze problem. You've probably seen, you've seen the maze problem where you've got to not fall in the hole and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, sure.
But a lot of them, they don't really seem to cover a lot of the tricks that you can use to improve the learning in the real world with a real scenario.
Right.
So I was really just looking for, here's something that I've built before that I think I could put machine learning on. And it's not something that I'd actually seen. Like I did a little bit of research, but no one had really, I didn't see any definitive answers anywhere. So I thought I'd experiment with that. And it actually sort of lined up quite closely with StarCraft, with a lot of the maps in StarCraft are mirror maps. So they're the same upside down as they are the other way. So one of the tricks that I did early on with the StarCraft bot is flip the map around. So instead of having to learn, say the spawn location would be at the top left and then the next game would be bottom right, instead of having to have these two, twice as much learning, if you can flip that information and invert it, then it can learn much more quickly. And it doesn't have that weird branching that can kind of happen because it's got the values come from the two different spawn locations. And so Northern Crosses is kind of a version of that where you're like, well, I can flip it, I can rotate it, I can do this, and you can actually look for a state that you've already been in, but it just is flipped around in some way, convoluted in some way, and then work out what the best action is, and then flip it all the way back, and then make the action perform on what the board looks like now.
Yeah. So noughts and crosses.
Yep.
Then, how did you go from there to being involved in the StarCraft community? Like, can you put the fuller the part of the movie that's the montage,
the middle bit.
Yeah.
So obviously did a bunch of programming for several years. And then kind of got interested in machine learning. I'm not really sure what sparked that. I think it could have been even Alpha Zero or whatever they called it, Deep Blue or whatever it was, the first. And then, of course, TensorFlow and all these sort of things started to come out, and I started to get interested in that. And then found some courses. And what I really wanted to do, like my ultimate goal, which is still kind of my dream, was to build a robot that could go and weed my garden for me.
Yeah, sure.
I really hate weeding the garden, and it's so time consuming and it's kind of annoying. And there's actually a project called farmbot.io where they've got a garden bed with a raised frame, and this robot, you tell it where you're planting things, and it will look for anything that's green. It does like a kind of image recognition kind of stuff. Looks for anything that's green outside of where the plants should be, and it goes, that's got to be a weed.
Right.
And they worked out that if it just pokes the weed down into the soil, it kills the weed. Like it's got very fragile root system, so the weed dies. I'm like, that is awesome. How do I do that on like a garden, like a massive garden? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, they've got like these, they haven't really taken off, but they've got these robotic lawnmowers, and you can set a perimeter and it'll just go around and mow the lawn, right? I'm like, okay, so surely this can't be that hard. They got self-driving cars and stuff, this can't be that hard. So I thought, I'm going to build a robot that drives around the garden, and it can mow the lawn, or it can poke weeds down, or it can do whatever. Turns out that's really hard. So I think I had one of those like common misconceptions people have. I think people go down one of two roads, and possibly even simultaneously. They think AI can do some really amazing things really easily, and then they think AI can't actually really do anything very well at all. Which I think Lex Friedman, said something about that with regards to self-driving cars. He's like, people think that AI can drive cars really well, but then they say, then other people say, cars can't drive any better than humans can. So anyway, that the idea of this robot that drives around and does the weeding for you. Turns out that's a really difficult problem, and there's a whole series of different things there. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm probably not going to solve that problem anytime soon. And also, I don't really know enough about machine learning yet to really do that effectively.
Sure.
So my next thought was, well, I play the drums, and I really love playing the drums. And I'm one of those drummers who can actually read sheet music because I learnt music on the piano first and then started playing the drums.
Yeah.
And so what I used to do is, and I still do this sometimes, is listen to a song and transcribe it into sheet music. But it's very time intensive, and you have to sit there with headphones on, playing the same loop back over and over again. And listen, oh, hang on, was that a hi-hat, or was that a crash cymbal, or sometimes it all blends together and all this sort of thing. And I thought, well, if I could make something that would transcribe the drums for me, and I could just feed it my whole catalog of albums of every band and every song that I have ever had, that'd be awesome, right? Because I could just, I'd have all the songs I'd ever need. Turns out that's also really hard. It is possible. However, the tricky part is actually getting the data in there and labeling, right? So I thought, oh, yeah, I'll just train this up. And then so I'm like, okay, this is a kick drum sound. And then this is a kick drum sound from another song. And this is a kick drum sound from another song. And then you're like, oh, man, this is going to take me half of my life just to go and label all these samples. So I was like, oh, man, this is going to take me forever, and this is really tricky. And I hadn't given up on that idea, and I still haven't given up on that idea. But around that time,
it's quite funny how with little projects you think you're gonna. I've got a few that I've still they're bookmarked.
Yeah,
I would love to carry on working on them, but yeah.
It's one of those things, and you also think that's got to be really easy, because one of the things that I found that we've kind of talked about is you get you do an online course, or you get a book, or you whatever, and they give you this problem and it seems insurmountable, and then they give you the answer and it just works, and it gets 98.3% accuracy of identifying hot dogs and not hot dogs, or whatever it happens to be, right? And you're like, man, that's really easy, that's awesome, sweet, I can go and do this anytime I want, right? So then you go and try and do it, and it turns out, no, that's really hard, really, really hard, and so you sort of lose sight of those dreams a little bit, and hang on, I've got to go back to the drawing board here, and I have to understand this a little bit more. And that's why, I guess, for me, I'm jumping around a bit, but I got into Starcraft 2, but then
so you went from sheet music to Starcraft 2.
Yeah, but then realized I probably had to pull it back a little bit and get back into noughts and crosses and things like that, just to understand mechanically what's happening there with the machine learning.
It's very good to try break a problem down into its easy. It's the most easiest example you can find of it before you start playing around with it.
Yeah, and you can see that with PySC2 and with DeepMind, they created a bunch of mini games that, at least, I don't know this for sure, but it seems like they went, well, these are some of the scenarios that you have in the game. I think one of them is defeat roaches, and one's train marines, that sort of thing.
Collect mineral shards.
Yeah, I don't know how the mineral shards fits in with the game. But,
True.
The idea of building marines, which I guess the idea is optimizing for producing a large amount of marines and knowing exactly how many supply depots and how many barracks to build, and then how many marines in what order, and maybe how many SCVs, and how to manage your economy. You can see that they broke down some of the problems of the full game rather than trying to solve the whole problem at once. So I had to just step back from that. So around the time when I was messing with this idea of doing the drums, transcription, I heard about, I'm not really sure how, I don't know if somebody sent it to me or if I just read about it or what happened, but I heard DeepMind and Blizzard are partnering on making some AI for Starcraft 2. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. And I don't know if it was at that time or soon after, then they released the PySC2 framework. And I'm like, sure enough, I'm like, well, I'm on this. I love Starcraft 2 and I love AI, right?
Can I interject here? So So I don't think I've ever asked you this, but yeah, had you played much StarCraft before this? Like, were you quite the big fan? I saw you had a little StarCraft character in your office there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd played the original StarCraft Brood War
Yep.
with friends. I'm more of a solo gamer. So
Did you ever have like LAN parties where you did Brood War or whatever?
not with Brood War that I can remember.
Yeah.
I was never big into LAN parties.
Yeah.
I was never big into friends. So computers are way better than friends. No, I'd played like games like Command and Conquer, Red Alert.
Yep.
Kind of those series. Back in the old days, man, this was like 20 years ago. I was playing Command and Conquer on a dial-up modem with my friend.
Awesome.
You know what I mean?
Great times.
Yeah, that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And even then, I was like figuring out how to hack the game so you could bait the enemy to come and attack you, and then you draw it into a line of fire, and then you could kill them and that sort of stuff.
Cool things you could do.
Lots of little tricks like that. I like hacking the Matrix like that.
Yeah.
And then of course I had a mate who was big into StarCraft, and I loved playing that. But it was kind of the same thing where you just like mass carriers or
Yep.
mass. What are the?
I kind of miss the old days of StarCraft, like before the internet, because like you'd have to come up with your own. There were non-cookie cutter like combos that you and your mates would come up with and play against each other.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wasn't even playing against people. I was just playing against the built-in AI, right?
True.
And it's hackable, so I was always looking for the little hack.
Yep.
And so you're like, okay, cool. I'm just going to wall up with cannons, and then I'm going to go up to carriers, and then I'm going to go out, or whatever it happens to be.
Yep.
So I did play that, and then StarCraft 2 came along, and we were like, holy cow, this thing's awesome. My mate was like raving to me. He's like, man, you see these things, like they've got these dudes that jump over cliffs and stuff. And I'm like, oh, now we know them as Reapers, but they jump up and down cliffs, and then they've got like, it's all 3D, and it's like incredible. And we were watching, and at the time that was mind blowing, right? Like I don't know how long ago that was. I think it was like 15 years ago or something. But it was like, wow, this is epic. So really, really, really keen into it, and enjoyed that thoroughly, played the campaign, obviously. And so I knew about StarCraft 2, but my interest had probably sort of eased off a little bit because nothing had really happened with the game for quite a while.
Sure.
And then they announced this, we're building an AI on top of it. And knowing about how they'd played chess and then Go and that sort of thing, I was like, wow, that's really interesting that they're going to do StarCraft. And I actually thought originally, that's going to be really easy. But as we know now, it's actually a really complicated problem.
It's been a research topic for 20 to 30 years type thing.
And even now I would say that it's not a solved problem. Even though they beat the humans a little bit, then the humans figured out the little hack to get them back. And
so can you explain what that little hack was? I don't know if we're jumping the gun here, but...
Well, I think there's a little glitch in... I can't remember who the player was, but there was a glitch kind of thing in the AI where he put his units off on a little island to the side, and then the AI would like approach it and go back and approach it and come back, and kind of got caught in a loop where it didn't know how to solve that problem. Yeah,
the whole generalization of these systems, that's the next like frontier, I think. But yeah, we'll get to that. In a bit.
Yeah, there's some really cool things that happen inside Alphastar.
Yeah.
So I found out about this, that they were doing this thing, and I was like, cool, well, obviously, forget about drums, forget about weeding robots. I'm building a StarCraft bot. Like, obviously, that's the most important thing to do right now. And I picked it up, and I'm like, cool, I'm going to read the documentation and tutorials, and of course there was nothing.
It's not easy.
It's built by programmers,
and
programmers don't like doing documentation. I should know, I am one. So I'm like, man, there's no documentation here, and it took me quite a while to get it running. And then I was like, you know what? There's no tutorials out there for this. I'm going to make one, and
was this circa Christmas 2017, or was it November?
It was
somewhere around there.
October, September, October, November, around there, because BlizzCon I think it was in November.
Yep.
So it would have been a month or two before that. So I have actually co-authored a book before on a PHP programming framework. That was several years ago. And I guess I sort of have always gone down that road of writing tutorials or trying to help people.
It feels good.
Yeah, and even when I had like a programming consulting business several years ago, and I used to write articles on for, I don't know, potential clients about how to use the internet and what you should be doing and how you should be marketing yourself and that sort of thing. So I sort of always tried to phrase things in a way that people could understand, even if they didn't have a lot of technical knowledge. So then taking from that and then co-authoring that book, and then I'm like, okay, cool, I've got the skills here to probably help people out. So I wrote a tutorial, very simple tutorial. This is how you get it running. This is how you make a basic bot that goes in and attacks.
I remember it.
Yeah, I think everybody does. And in the back of my mind, I was like, man, if I'm like the only tutorial out there, DeepMind might notice me. Like Senpai noticed me, you know what I mean? Like I was like, they might notice me. They might see what I'm doing, and that might get me somewhere. And like a couple of weeks later, I get this message on GitHub because I posted I don't know if it was an issue or what it was. I posted something because obviously I'm trying to promote my article. So I go onto the PySC2 thing and I post a thing here. I've written some tutorials. They're over here. Have fun. And then Oriel, who's the lead on the PySC2 project or on the Alphastar project, put a message on there saying, hey, you should apply to come to the Blizzcon. We're doing an artificial intelligence.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, they called it an AI summit or a little side convention thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, he noticed me. Yeah, so I was stoked just to get that right.
It is pretty awesome.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool.
But I think well deserved as well. Like if you go to the effort of making it the tutorial and there's no tutorials out there, then that's cool. Like it's well earned.
Yeah, and you know, it takes a few hours of your time and there's a bit of energy in it.
A few hours to say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, there's something to be said for giving. You know, to put something out there, and I don't want money back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, sure, I've got a Patreon and I do get a little bit of money, like very little, but I appreciate those people so much because it's such a significant thing for people to give money and not necessarily they're giving money to help me to write more tutorials for everybody. So they're not giving it so they get the tutorial necessarily. They're giving it so other people, you know, can have the tutorials. And I really like that because that supports me in what I'm doing, which is trying to make the tutorials for everybody. So I got this message from Oriel. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. So I go and click the link and I go in there and I apply and I'm like, cool, that's done. I'm never going to hear from those guys again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, you've made it into the next round.
So round of what?
Well, I guess obviously they're thinking they're going to get quite a few people applying.
Right.
And so...
Is this to work at DeepMind or...
This is just to go to BlizzCon. Okay. So what it was is there was BlizzCon 2017, I think it was, a couple of years ago. And then in the hotel, like right next to the convention center where BlizzCon was, they had a couple of the convention rooms or boardrooms, whatever they call them. They had a couple of those. I don't know how many people there were, like 50, 60, maybe a little bit more. So they have a limited space. So you had to sort of make it through the qualifications. And, okay, who we're going to accept, who we're not going to accept. And, of course, a lot of the wording that was in that application form was things like students or lecturers or whatever. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, well... I'm a bloke who dropped out of high school. Like, then they're not gonna want me. And but then they're like, yeah. So you're in the next round. Give us some more information. And they actually offered to cover some of the costs for getting there, which was awesome because, to be honest, if it wasn't for that, I'm not sure I would have actually gone.
Yeah, sure.
It still cost me quite a bit of money, but it would have cost me quite a lot more money to go, and it would have been harder to do it, and yet it changed my life. So, what an opportunity that they would actually help to pay for that. So they put that in there, and then I'm like, oh yeah, well I'm going to ask that they help me, give me some money and to get over there. And I thought, but then they're just going to go, oh, you know, screw this guy. He just wants money to go over here. And then they're like, yeah, okay, you can come over. And I'm like, oh, crap.
You actually have to go now.
I guess I'm going. And it was
literally.
from memory, it was like a couple of weeks away. So I was like, oh, now I've got to go like book the flights, book the accommodation. And of course, all the accommodation near the convention center was gone because everyone had booked that a year in advance. So I had to book all the flights and the accommodation. And then I was like, wow, well, I guess I'm going to BlizzCon for a weekend. Like, fly from I believe it was from Gold Coast to Sydney. I think I did a hop flight. So I was like, I think I flew over there on the Friday.
Where was it? Is it San Diego? Where is BlizzCon?
Well, it's in LA somewhere.
Okay, right.
So Blizzard is in Irvine.
Yep.
And I believe the convention center was kind of near there somewhere.
Okay.
So yeah, I had to fly to LA like on a Friday afternoon or morning or whatever it was, I can't remember. And then you land on the Friday morning or something like that.
And BlizzCon is Saturday, Sunday?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember specifically. We might have even caught up on the Friday night. Or the Friday afternoon, I may have gone in. My memory's really sketchy. It could even be Saturday.
Same.
All I know is I flew to LA for a weekend,
Yeah.
like a weekend. And so flew all the way over there, 14 hours or 13 or 14-hour flight.
Did you fly back on the Monday or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, fair enough. Wow.
So yeah, it was
Lifetime opportunity, man.
Yeah, exactly. And it was totally crazy. Like, so I land, jump in the little minivan or whatever it is, go to the hotel, check in at the hotel, drop my stuff off, and I think I was like, sweet, I'm jumping in an Uber and go to the convention center. So I'm in an Uber going to the convention center, and as we get closer, I'm like, holy cow, this thing's huge. Like, we've got a convention center here on the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
It's like 5 times the size of that, right? I'm thinking, wow, this is insane. And like the dude in the Uber is like, oh, you're going to BlizzCon? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, oh, I'm into Madden, NFL, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, yeah, cool. I'm into Starcraft. And he's like, oh, yeah, so you're here for anything in particular? I'm like, oh, I'm here for that AI. We're doing the little AI thing. And he's like, oh. And he's talking about like how Madden NFL or something, like it's got this like AI in it or something. And can't remember the whole conversation, but that was kind of cool.
Classic taxi talk.
Yeah. And then like we pull up to the hotel, like where the little side summit is, and there's just people everywhere, and of course people are dressed up in
Cosplay.
all their cosplay,
Yeah.
and people, it's crazy. There's people everywhere.
I've always wanted to go, to be honest. I think you're so lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then so I go inside, and I'm like, where's the Deepmind thing? And they're like, oh, up this way. Like, they had a little, someone helping and directing people. So I head up. It was like a couple of floors up, and you go up the escalators or something. And I'm walking down the hallway, and somebody comes up to me and goes, are you Stephen Brown? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, oh, I love your tutorials, man. I'm like, oh, thanks. Cool. Like, and then, I'm just walking down the hallway, and all these people are like, oh, that's Stephen Brown. And like, this crazy. And I'm like, it's just blowing my mind that people are recognizing me. And I guess, I put my photo on everything. So that's kind of cool. So I go in, and, I've got my massive 17-inch gaming laptop over the shoulder, one that like you go in through the airport and it doesn't fit in the trays that you've got to put your laptop into. And of course, every time you go through, the guy's like, oh, could you get a bigger laptop? And it's like, yeah, well, I've heard that joke about 1,000 times. Thanks, buddy. So I go in and I put my laptop down and just find a spot, and a few people are just milling around doing whatever, and then just people just constantly coming up to me and grabbing their friends and saying, hey, man, this is that guy, Stephen. He's the one who made the tutorials. And they're like, oh, thanks so much, man. I followed your tutorials and it helped me out. My head is just spinning already. Like, I've just come off a massive flight, and, so I've had very little sleep. And then all these people are like recognizing me. I'm feeling like a rock star. It's kind of crazy. And things calmed down a little bit. And then we sort of got into it, and it's like, oh, here's a couple of guys from Blizzard, and here's a couple of guys from DeepMind are here. So Oriole was there. So he's like the researcher, data scientist, whatever they call him.
Yep.
And then there was a guy there called Timo, and he's actually the lead engineer. So he's the one who does pretty much all of the code. And, they did a few little presentations on what they were doing, and different people got up and did different talks. And I got up and did a talk about, how to build one and all the experiments that I'd done and that kind of thing. Then I'm like, okay, so we're going to go and have some lunch now. So I go and grab some food, and I go and sit down, and then Oriole comes and sits down next to me. And, a couple of the Blizzard guys come and sit down at the table, and they're just talking, and my head's just exploding. I'm just like sitting next to this incredible brain of a guy.
Yeah.
And
He's well respected in the machine learning community.
Yeah, and he's a really nice guy. And of course,
Yeah.
he's just flown from the UK, so he's completely like zonked as well. Like he was just like me, where everyone was exhausted. But he's just sitting there. The dude's sitting there right next to me, and I don't even know that I fully realized what was going on at the time.
Yeah.
But now that I step back from it and I see how much popularity this has, and what has it's become of it. Like I didn't know that Oriole was the dude. You know what I mean?
Right.
He was just a guy who was there, who was really nice, and he was just talking about cool stuff. And we had some conversations. Like we were talking to the guys from Blizzard, and we were like saying, "Oh, you're going to put some machine learning into Starcraft, like make it so you can play against say an enemy that gets better and better against you, or whatever." And they're like, "Well, it's really hard to put something in there that works reliably and that sort of stuff." And of course, I was still in this dreamland of like, "Oh no, machine learning just works, man. It's really easy. And you're just gonna, go ahead, do it." And it turns out they were right. It is really difficult. And there were a few other people there from different companies and different universities, and people from Spain, and I'm sure there were people from Korea. I don't know fully, but everyone was just, there's ideas flowing around. There were guys messing with Linux versions, and I'm on the Windows version, and some guy came and sat down next to me, and he was like, "Hey, I'm blah blah blah." I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he was also doing some stuff, and I'd seen him on some of the forums or on the chat areas and all that sort of thing. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm a drummer too." And they were like, "Oh wow, that's really weird that, two drummers are into StarCraft 2 bots," and that sort of stuff. So it's really just this energy around of optimism and excitement and learning and community. Like that was the thing that I really...
Yeah, the StarCraft communities, the research, machine learning research StarCraft community is actually huge.
Yeah, and there are some people who come into it and try to take. Like one of the things that I found really difficult is people will come in, like there's a big Discord, there's a Starcraft Ai channel on Discord, and people would come in and go, "Oh, this is crap, the documentation sucks, and oh, it's so buggy, and why can't I just do this, and blah, 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 blah." And I just... I felt a little bit bad, but I just said I got a little bit sick of it at one point because, Timo, who's the lead engineer, he's in there helping people, you know what I mean? And he's really, really giving with his time. He spends a lot of energy in there, answers a lot of questions, and helps people out a lot. And he's put a lot of energy into this. And he told me that he was one of the driving forces in making it open source. He was like, "We should make this open source and make it out there, put it out there for the community."
Can you tell that story? Because I think you've told it to me once before. Do you want to elaborate for everyone else listening how PySC2 actually got made open source, or one version of the story?
I'll tell you what I understand, which could be completely wrong,
Sure,
but I'll tell you my understanding is obviously Blizzard were building the API, which I'm sure they always intended to make open source, and then DeepMind was working very tightly with them to build PySC2 to talk to that API. And I guess my recollection is that Timo sort of said, well, look, or maybe he just thought, you know what, people are going to people are going to make API frameworks for this. They're going to make code that interacts with this, and of course people have. But he said, well, people are going to do it, and they're going to make it open source. So why don't we do it and be open source? And so that's what they did. So I thought that was incredible.
It's cool. It's just cool.
It sort of seems like if it wasn't for him, it wouldn't be open source. We wouldn't have this framework.
It's funny how like in life, so there's heaps of those like junction points where like one dude's like input potentially, if this version of the story
exactly, yeah, and
created a whole community.
Yeah, and and he's been a real driving force in helping people out, and they have an internal development version of PySC2. Like you could see, Alphastar came out, and then like not long after that, I think they updated. They had a development branch of PySC2 that suddenly had all the things in it that you couldn't do before. And they also get early releases of the API from Blizzard, right? Because they're working tightly with Blizzard. And I'm cool with that. That's cool.
Yeah, sure.
Because that stuff eventually it might find its way into the projects that everybody gets to have access to. So yeah, if it wasn't for him, it wouldn't be out there, and we wouldn't have a framework that we could use to sort of play around with.
Yeah.
So
I think he's even answered a couple of my questions. So yeah,
I'm sure he has. Yeah,
very generous.
Yeah.
Dude.
So when you see people coming into this chat, and he's the guy who like built the framework, and then I guess I have a bit of an ego that I'm like, man, I put a tutorial out there for free. I spend hours on this stuff, and I'm on this chat helping everybody for free, and people just come in demanding stuff.
Yeah, but I think that's like we could have another whole podcast about that. I think it's just like the times, dude. Everyone just demands stuff. I don't know.
I think that people just don't respect how big of a deal it is. And look, my guess is a lot of these people are just students who haven't quite gotten into the real world of like having a job and trying to get paid, and not trying to be condescending in that, but if you've got a job, like, I've got a job, I've got a mortgage, I'm trying to pay my bills. So spending time on something for free for a bunch of other people is something that takes a lot of energy, and it's quite difficult to do, finding that time to do it.
Yep. But do you think it's easier to do because you love it?
Oh yeah.
I assume you
I stay up until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes trying to get something working and that sort of stuff. So it's easy to focus on it, but it's not that easy to take something that you understand and then word it in a way that somebody else can hopefully come to understand it as well. To put it in a sequence that makes sense, because I can give you a finished product of some code of a bot that will achieve a certain goal, build a bunch of Marines and win, right?
Yep.
But then breaking that, and I've come to that conclusion after hours of coding and trying this and trying that and restructuring things and doing this, and then come to that final product. Then what I've got to do is refine that final product so it's simpler, ideally. And then I've got to deconstruct it back to a step-by-step reconstruction that you can do, where at each point you can test it and understand what's happening and build on each step to the next step. Because if I give you, okay, here's 30 things you've got to do, and you're not going to know what any of them mean until the end.
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I know what you mean.
Yeah. So that's actually the time-consuming part, but
very time-consuming.
There's the love, and then there's the labor. You know what I mean? So
100%.
There's all that energy at the beginning.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when people come into a chat and they're aggressive like that, I get a little bit annoyed. And so I think I said to somebody, he said, the documentation sucks and there's all these bugs. And I said, well, you can always contribute.
Yeah, 100%.
And that shut down one guy. And then another guy came in saying how, I can't believe how bad this software is. And I said, yeah, I know, right, for the price. Because it's free. And I'm like... So maybe a little bit snarky, but that shut them down, and that's kind of, the community has gotten a lot better since then. And I think, hopefully I think that's going to happen in any community, but it doesn't happen a lot in the Starcraft 2 community. I just think it kind of got a lot of popularity all of a sudden, And people were treating it like this is a product of DeepMind that they're putting out there. But
Right.
it's not a product of DeepMind. It's, as far as I see, it's the idea of a guy there who puts it out because he wants it to be out in the open for people to use, that takes the energy of people like myself in their own time to improve it and build on it.
Cool, man.
And so, you know, and it's got a lot of momentum. A lot of projects out there you'll see, they spool up and then they die quite quickly. But this has still got momentum because obviously DeepMind's still working with it. So
So we'll get to that.
yeah.
DeepMind, where they're currently at. Maybe we can get some inside info here.
Sure.
How much you're able to share, I don't know. But anyways, we'll get to that in a second. Is there anything else you can add from the BlizzCon experience? So
There was one really cool thing that happened.
yep.
There was a guy there who he basically, so the grand finals of WCS, I believe it is, the grand
What's
final.
WCS? Is that like a Starcraft competition?
Yeah, the World Championship
Sorry,
Series.
my ignorance there.
Yeah, I'm not like hugely into it
Yeah.
either. Like I watch it from a distance, but I'm not really into it, you know, like in terms of I don't know who's who and
Sure.
what's going on all the time. I sort of come into it and go out of it depending on how much time I've got. So he kind of like grabbed me when the grand finals was on, and we had a few passes from the AI summit. They gave us some BlizzCon passes, and they said AI summit on it, and I kept one. That said, I've got one in my office there. That
Maybe we
says,
can see it out after this, eh?
yeah, I'll have to try and find it. It
Yeah.
says AI Summit. There was like AI Summit 2, AI Summit 3, blah, blah, blah. And I grabbed the one that says AI Summit on it, which I thought was really cool. Or AI Workshop, I think it's called. So he grabbed me and he was like, let's go see the finals. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. Let's go do it. So we go down and we watch the finals. Of course, everybody's already seated. They've taken all the seats, so we're just standing off to the side. And then the dude wins the grand finals and he goes, let's go in, let's go in. So we go in right up to, if you watch any of the videos of what happens is there's a podium like right in the middle there. And it's got the trophy or whatever in the middle. And we ran in and kind of got into the hustle, and we were like a meter away from the guy who had won and the lady who was doing the presentation and all that sort of stuff. And they're talking, blah, blah, blah. Next minute, boof, all the massive confetti just goes off and there's just confetti flying everywhere. I've got a photo of that, of me inside the confetti, just looking around, like hands everywhere. It looks crazy, right? I'm like, this is intense. Like,
I think you're really selling BlizzCon at the moment. Like, I want to go now.
yeah, like I wouldn't have picked it, right? Like I've never really been into it. I wouldn't have gone there by choice. But when I was there, and also I'm a bit more reserved. Like you know, so to have somebody who dragged me in there and said, "Come on, let's go," and then I'm like, I don't want to go and stand in the middle here, but he's like, "Come on, come on, come on." So, and then I was just like, wow, like the energy here is amazing. It's so intense. And then what happened after that, which is kind of interesting, I watch Winter Gaming, who's one of the main StarCraft 2 streamers. He's quite popular.
Yep. I think I've actually seen one or two, you know, the old YouTube recommendation system.
Sure, yeah.
I think I watched one or two of his videos.
He's slightly controversial, I think, for some of the things that might have happened early on in his career, but he's also a guy who's fairly giving. Like he seems to try and support the StarCraft 2 community, and he tries to teach people who are beginners and that kind of thing. Of course, he makes some money out of it, but you know, I think that's cool. So I'd sort of been paying attention to him, and he posted out, I don't know if it was on his Twitter or something, hey, me and a bunch of the other streamers and some of the casters are going to be outside the convention center after the grand finals. So I go out and I'm like, yeah, I'll go and see. And then I'm like, where are they going to be? And then they're going to be over here under the flag that says G or whatever the section was. And I'm just standing around, and it's like 3 or 4 people around, you know, nothing really magical going on. And next minute, Winter just like walks out, and he's like this short little dude. And I'm like, oh, hey man, how you doing? And he's like, oh, good. And then talking to him and yeah, just talking about, you know, how's BlizzCon and all that sort of thing. and talking to him for a while, and then I turn around, and there's like Roddy, Pig, Maynard. I'm trying to remember it. Like all the casters, like pretty much everyone except for like Artosis and Tasteless. Like pretty much everybody except for the big guys. And they're just standing there. And so next minute, you know, Pig comes over and he's talking to me. So he's
For people listening, can you explain what casters are? I know, but
yeah. So casters are the people who sort of call the games as they're going.
yeah.
And quite often there'll be people who stream on a service like Twitch. They'll play and they'll stream, or they'll call. They'll talk through somebody else's game, and it's like, oh, this is, and whoever's in the red, you know, is gonna coming in. You know, I don't think the guy in blue sees it coming, and blah blah blah. You know, that kind of thing. So Tasteless and Artosis are like the main guys. They always call the grand finals. They always call the big games, and everybody else kind of fills in the rest. So Pig's an Australian. I'm not sure exactly where he's from. Maybe Melbourne or Sydney. So Pig's there. Pig comes across and he starts talking to us. And he's like, "Hey, what's that AI summit thing that you've got hanging from your neck? Or what are you here for?" And I'm like,
You wanted some of that action, huh?
yeah. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm here for the AI summit." You know, like, so here I am trying to be the fanboy, and next minute, these guys are like, "Oh, what's that all about? Oh, is that the Deepmind thing? Oh, is that blah blah blah?" And they're like asking me all these questions, and I'm like, "That's really cool." And then I turn around and there's Maynard. So he's from Adelaide, I think. And then Maynard's there in his like thongs and whatever. It's quite cold that night, but you know, he's standing around and I'm like, "Hey man, nice accent you got there. You're like another Aussie, you know." He's like, "Oh yeah, cool man." And but we're just talking about, you know, I was like, "Oh yeah, see you've got thongs." And he's like, "Mate, you can't call them thongs, they're flip flops." And
Yeah, just for anyone else that's international listening in, that's a thong is an Australian word for a flip flop.
Yeah. Yeah. So he was like, "Yeah," I'm like, "Yeah, no, I know, man, I know." So that was kind of cool. So that was like, just like those kinds of things were just insane to be there, to be a part of that. They had a massive, what's the name of the Zerg chick, the Kerrigan?
Yeah.
So they had a massive Kerrigan statue there, like when she's the queen, you know, when she turns into the Zerg. And I think they had they have another one anyway, the Terran dude, but I can't remember which one it is. So they have like all these statues there, and it's like, so it's really just full on. And of course they had the Overwatch teams and all that was all sort of going on at the same time. So that whole weekend just like buzzes by, and then I'm at the airport at LAX, going through security, and I hear some dudes behind me, and I turn around and it's the Australian Overwatch team. And they're just like talking and carrying on, and they were talking about how ridiculous airport security is. And I'm like, "Yeah, well, wait until you see when you have to take your shoes off in a minute, guys." And like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Dude, when you fly in the US, you got to take your shoes off when you go through security." And sure enough, we have to take all our shoes off and go through, and then got through to the other side and sat down to have some food, and they sat down next to me. And so it was kind of funny because I was a part of this world all of a sudden that I'd never been a part of before, and all because I liked StarCraft 2 and wrote a tutorial. Like,
Yeah, but it's cool.
This whole thing stemmed from that one little decision.
So let's talk now a little bit about how things have progressed since then. So you've written more tutorials, right?
Yeah, quite a few. So there's been some pretty significant advancements in PySC2. So the first version of PySC2 was, and this kind of leads into the Alphastar evolution.
It's like PySC2. There was a lot of work around it then, sort of Alphastar, and now there's like post Alphastar stuff for whatever they're working on now.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So the original version of PySC2 was designed to be very human-like. So the interface was, here's the screen and here's it's kind of not the exact rendering of the game, but more like, here's these unit types and here's the terrain, and then the minimap had the same thing. And then it has all these components for the interface of the game. So when you click on something, you can see information about it as a human. And then, so in order to get that information as a bot, you'd have to click and select it. So you'd have to do all the same things that a human would have to do. And that was the first version that sort of came out. Then when we were at BlizzCon, they announced that they were working on what they call the RGB layer, which is like the rendered version of the game. And there was a huge...
RGB being images.
Correct.
Yep. So
Yeah.
visual perception.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, exactly. And then there was this huge round of applause and everyone went crazy for it and all that sort of stuff because a lot of the machine learning that had been done on games to that point, especially by DeepMind, was based on the graphical
Pixels.
interface. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, it was they were looking at the pixels of what was rendered to the screen. Well, from what I can tell, it turns out that's actually quite difficult, especially with a 3D game. When you're looking at a game like Pong or Pac-Man or whatever, it's fairly straightforward, right? Like there's only so much. But when it's 3D, suddenly there's all these different angles. So every unit looks different depending on which direction it's facing. And there's all these effects like an explosion that could partially obscure something. And that sort of thing. So I think people thought that was going to be the big thing.
Using vision.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And of course, because DeepMind already had a whole bunch of neural nets they'd already configured that were playing other games, I don't know if they thought, but they were obviously trying it. But I think a lot of people in the room thought that was going to be like the big thing that cracked it wide open. Well, it turns out that didn't really crack it wide open. It didn't really happen. And then I think the next BlizzCon came and people were thinking
So
something.
2018.
2018, I believe.
Yep.
And I think people were like expecting an announcement. And I actually thought they were going to run another
so
AI
did I,
summit.
yeah.
I thought they were going to do another AI workshop. And I thought, hey, we're going to get another flight and it's going to be great. and no, that didn't happen, which is a bit of a bummer, but, you know, I can
It is what it
understand.
is.
Yeah. And then there wasn't really a massive announcement. I think they just said, yeah, we're still working on it and blah, 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 blah. But sure enough, I think only a couple of months later, here was this Alphastar thing.
Yeah.
And when you look at that...
Start of this year.
Yeah.
2019.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was like January or February of this year. And when you look at what they're doing with that, it's very, very, very different to what they were originally trying to do.
Interesting.
So originally, and I believe this was Oracle's kind of approach from the beginning, was he wanted it to be as human-centric as possible. And he had actually built some partial machine learning bots for Starcraft, like Brood War version, and done quite well. I think he'd won a tournament or some sort of competition with that. And I think he was also a player himself, not extensively, but he was quite a good player. So I believe that was the original vision, like, this is how we're going to do it. And I think they probably bashed their head against a wall for several months and had to sort of withdraw a little bit and go, okay, well, we've got to get something, let's just try something simpler, or let's try a different approach. So from the very beginning, there's been this part of the Starcraft 2 API called the raw interface.
This is the C++ part, right?
Well, yeah, like, you know, a lot of the other frameworks and libraries, like Command Centers, like was one that David Churchill made for Brood War that was adapted for Starcraft 2. It's made in C++, and I believe a lot of it probably uses that raw API. But it wasn't available in PySC2 from the beginning. You could have written something yourself to kind of use it, but it wasn't really built in, and it takes a lot of energy to build. So suddenly they go and do this Alphastar thing, and they announce it, and they're beating human players. And
It was quite an exciting. I got up early in the morning to watch that at like 5 a.m. I think. I will admit that to everyone listening.
I was not that dedicated. So it was really cool to see that, and I was stunned. Like, I sort of felt like when BlizzCon came along and they didn't announce anything, I was like, oh man.
There must be something.
Well, I thought maybe it's dead. Or you know what I mean? Or maybe they're like, they've pulled back from this and they said, like, we need to focus on other things.
Right.
Afterwards, I thought, well, actually, there's a good chance they really tried to have something ready for BlizzCon and they just didn't quite make it. Because it was so close. It was only a couple of months afterwards that they announced Alphastar.
True.
So I think that's just a typical software project, really. Yeah. And what we learned then was that actually they had expanded the team. They'd brought in David Silver, who's his YouTube tutorials are. He's very well known at DeepMind. I believe he's behind AlphaGo and he's behind all those other ones. and then he became the co-lead on the project. I don't know this for sure. This is purely just a thought that I had. He might have been the guy that said, "Okay, let's simplify this and let's take a different approach."
Right.
And I know that they had a lot more people to the team, and it just actually, when I thought DeepMind had pulled back a little bit from it, it turns out they had actually gone all in.
Put fuel on the fire.
Yeah, that was actually, they'd really gotten into it. So then, after they did that and they beat some humans and that was all cool and the world was excited, then I sort of said to Timo, so, how long before we get that stuff,
Pushing into the old repo.
Yeah, and it was very quick. It was like a matter of weeks, I think. Very quick.
So I haven't actually played with. So that's all been released now. All the Alphastar tools are now on the PySC2.
They're on the development branch still.
Yep.
There are a couple of bugs or issues with it.
And this is so. There's no longer all the visual stuff is still there.
It's all still there. You can still use it.
They don't think they used it for Alphastar.
They didn't use it for Alphastar. Mm-hmm. So what they made is this raw interface, which gives you a lot more information. There's some significant differences. One of the main things is it observes the game in what's called the world space. Mm-hmm. So it's the entire world, whereas it's not just the screen and the minimap. And what that means is you can know things about a unit that's not on the screen that you would not normally know as a human.
Right.
So like the health.
So there's been some controversy around that as well, yeah?
Well, I think people didn't like that. And I was a bit bummed out about it to begin with. But actually, now that I look at it, I see that it's just a step. And I think it was a sensible step because they had to prove that it could be done. Yeah. Right?
It's again, like we talked about at the start, making things simple for yourself and then trying to add layers of complexity.
DeepMind's version of simple is very different to mine. It's nowhere near as simple as what I would need. But yeah, they'd simplified it and made it a little bit easier for themselves. So, instead of the bot being human limited, now it can understand, say, what the health is of a unit across the other side of the map that it can't actually see. There are some really weird little glitchy things that I don't know that they're ever going to be able to solve. Like if you have a cloaked unit, a pro player can see a cloaked unit, but a not so pro player probably may not see it, right? Mm-hmm. And there are little tricks you can do.
It's called shimmer or something like.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a distortion of light going through it. So a little bit like you're looking through a magnifying glass, except there's no frame, right? So I think I've actually seen an article where they talk about the fact that they have this shimmer and the bot will immediately see the shimmer because it's zeros and ones. So it's either there or it's not there. Away. So it knows it's there, but it still has to follow the rules of having something that can reveal the cloaked unit before it can respond to that. So I don't think you're ever going to solve that unless you go for the pure RGB approach where it has to actually see a shimmer on the screen and has to interpret that shimmer as being a unit. Yep. So that was one of the changes that they made. And, of course, being able to act in the world space means that it doesn't have to have the screen on a unit in order to control it. Yep. Which means it can be...
Controlling stuff without actually being visualizing it.
Yeah, it can see everything all at once. So it can see its army attacking the enemy base while it can also see its own base and also be building buildings and producing units and doing all sorts of stuff and seeing the army all at the same time. Whereas a human would typically look at its army, maybe micro a little bit, do a few little actions to try and help its army and then go back to their base and then maybe produce it, build some buildings or do whatever. Sometimes they'll do that without going there because you've got the hotkeys that you've got the control groups, so you can actually press the number 5 and that will get you, say, all your barracks or your whatever it is, and you can press the hotkey for producing a bunch of Marines or those sorts of things. So to some degree, a human can kind of control their base, but you can't choose where to place a building unless you actually look at the screen and place the building. Whereas the Alphastar bot can do it anywhere, right?
Yep, right, got you.
But I think that was a really good step. But that was a significant change. And then once that code was made available, it turns out that really, really, really simplifies building a bot as well.
So what's the community like now in terms of using, are there many people using, by community, I mean like the Starcraft machine learning community. Are there many people using the new PySC2 interface API? Or is there still a lot of people doing work with the visual side of things? Or is that a valid question to ask?
Yeah, it's hard to tell to some degree without inflating my own ego. I think people do whatever there's a tutorial for. So I think until I sort of wrote the tutorial on how to use this new interface for that, like what Alphastar was doing, I'm not sure many people really even knew it existed.
Okay.
And I haven't seen a lot of readership on that stuff.
So any potential other tutorial writers out there, do you think there's a competition on the horizon?
I haven't actually seen a whole lot. There have been quite a few people who built a lot of stuff quite a while ago, but they haven't really kept stuff up to date.
Right.
So I'm probably one of the few people who's actually really trying to keep things up to date. And I only publish stuff every few months just by time limitations. But it's really tricky because there are bugs in the system that make things really difficult. For example, there used to be an issue, and I believe it's still an issue, where you couldn't execute. Let's say you've got a barracks and it has an add-on like a tech lab, right? Now, one of the important parts of a Terran build order, that's for the people who don't know, that's one of the races in the game, one of the sides in the game. One of the important parts of their build order is that you get a tech lab so that you can get some of the upgrades that make your unit better, and it's almost essential to having to be able to compete at a higher level. Building a tech lab on the side of your barracks, there is a command to you just push a button as a human and it just puts a tech lab there. That button was actually mapped to the same command as when you have to lift up the barracks and then land them again with the tech lab on the side, which significantly complicates the process of a bot. Instead of being like one command, it now has to know that it has to lift and then place with the tech lab.
There's a few more actions required there.
And then when you're actually placing something, you have to choose the X and Y coordinates, which blows it out significantly. So that was one of the bugs that really held me back to begin with the Terran build order. There was apparently a bug, I don't entirely know, but there was one of the reasons that DeepMind chose Protoss instead of Zerg or Terran. So Terran, I believe they had some of the same problems I had. Zerg, I believe there's a problem to do with selecting lava or one of those sorts of things where it wouldn't do the same thing. So just to step back a little bit, one of the most significant things that they did on Alphastar is they trained it on human replays. So one of the incredible things that Blizzard does is they release thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of replays. So they take replays of games that people are actually playing on their servers. They anonymize them, so they get rid of all the chat and all the player names and anything that could be used to say this was blah, blah, blah's game. And then they release them. And I believe you can actually tap into they release them on like daily. So DeepMind is literally just got a script running that downloads these replays daily and then uses it to train the bot. Because obviously new versions of the game come out and that kind of thing, so they can. So the original goal, which like with AlphaGo you may have seen, they trained it against itself with no human experience.
Self-play.
You know what I mean? So it just played against itself. When it came to Alphastar, they actually sort of bootstrapped or kicked off the machine learning using the replays, because what they found was there's just so many different things it could do. The ability to have it construct an optimal kind of process, step by step, of putting something together that was actually reasonable, either was going to take too long or very difficult to know whether it was actually going to get there with whatever neural network structures they had. So they decided, well, let's use those replays and train it. So it got to a certain point, and then they used the self-play. So then it played against itself, and evolved strategies from there. So at first it would have been playing a lot like humans, and then after a while it might have branched off in a few areas. And they actually created, one of the cool things they created, and you might know this from even standard machine learning, not even reinforcement learning, the idea of having like random trees, random forests where you've got like different algorithms that do different, they're either initialized differently or there are different algorithms that solve the same problem differently. And when you combine those algorithms together, you can actually get a better, a more accurate result from the combination of those.
Ensemble modeling.
That kind of stuff, right? And then you got stacking and you got a few other different things like that. So there's actually a similar concept in reinforcement learning you've probably heard of, like actor critic, where you have one thing acting and another thing saying, well, that was a good thing or that was a bad thing, and it kind of learns from there. And then Alphastar kind of took it another level where they created a bot tournament where it's not just self-play, but it's actually different bots playing against each other using different kind of strategies. I think it's kind of like in that evolutionary algorithms kind of theory, and I think in neural nets they have this idea of like you drop out certain nodes that, you know, okay, this one's not learning, drop it out, you know, those kinds of things. I don't know all the technical details of all these things, but, you know, these are some of the theories. So there's kind of this theory of, you know, try these different algorithms, try, you know, if something's really strong, then play it against something else and find the strongest of the bunch and then get them to play against each other and then continue to evolve on that. So that's kind of what they did. So that was probably one of the other things.
It's called the Alphastar League or something, I think.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that surprised me, was that they bootstrapped it off human play. But I think it was necessary. Without that, I don't think it would have made any
It's such a
meaningful
massive problem space.
Yeah.
Just as a side note, actually, something that I'd like to add is I know a master's student last year in Sydney who actually applied this algorithm called GALE, stands for Generative Adversarial Imitation Learning.
Yep.
And they were doing the whole imitation learning thing with GANs. Off replays, and it was starting to learn. It built barracks and stuff. It was like navigating. There was a little drone that was like navigating to do scouting. It learned the whole spam clicking thing, and I was like, "Whoa," you know.
And that's exactly what they did with Alphastar, right? Like it actually does the spam clicking stuff and the whole thing.
I know, it's crazy.
It's really cool. I'd love to really. I haven't looked at their work in detail, but I'd love to see what they've done there, because it's actually quite tricky to interpret replays into something meaningful, and it's very time consuming to run the replays. So it's really cool that they did that.
So to sort of round out, I talk about Alphastar then. Are there any other? So we talked a bit like about the modifications to PySC2 that has come out of Alphastar. Is there anything that you can sort of add about your knowledge of Alphastar itself, about like the overall architecture that they used, or something along those lines? So we talked about, like, for example, we talked about like they stopped using vision as the main thing. Is there anything else along those lines that's
I know one of the big things that
you might have some inside info on?
I don't have a lot of information about, because those guys also know how to protect their jobs by understanding what they can and can't say.
Which is fair enough.
I've asked many questions that have had responses of, I'm not sure I can answer that question. One of the biggest controversy that came out of Alphastar was APM.
Right.
The actions per minute.
Great.
And I know a little bit. I wrote an article about my response to Alphastar, and I know a little bit more now than I did then. Now that I'm using the raw actions and that kind of stuff. And I have seen since an article where I believe it was Oriole says APM is a very difficult thing to control, and I'll tell you why. When you're using raw actions, it will select, act, and deselect a unit all within the one instruction. So if I want to move a unit from point A to point B, it'll select, issue the move command, and then deselect.
And that's all one action.
is one action for the bot, but potentially could be interpreted as multiple actions by the game.
Right.
And there's a huge debate, and Oriole sort of talked about this quite a bit when we were at BlizzCon, about whether it's unrealistic for a bot to be able to perform more actions or to know more accurate information. For example, when you're a human looking at the health bar, you don't go, that's 93% health. You just kind of roughly in your brain see the image and go, that's like this much. The difference between 80%, 75% or 90% may not be that significant, right? But you give the bot a very specific value because that's how it works. So that's one side of it where being human comparable is difficult. But on the other side, humans know that green is good and red is bad. We know this from all sorts of other things we've seen, like traffic lights. We know that, we see that on signs. If you're walking around an airport, it's red and don't go this way, or green, this is the way you go, or driving down the road, you've got these sorts of things. When you see something in Starcraft 2 that looks like a plane, you know what a plane is, so you know, oh, this thing must be flying above the ground. When you instruct something to attack, you understand the idea of a projectile and how that works. The bot doesn't come into the game with any of that prior knowledge, but the humans do. So it's not really a solvable problem. So people sort of argue one side or the other. It's probably not really ever going to come to a conclusion where suddenly people go, oh, I get what you're talking about now, we totally agree, because humans, we don't know what information humans have and how much learning. So when Alphastar had like hundreds of years worth of learning, sure, but how much, we don't know if humans are born with some embedded knowledge
from our genetics or something.
Yeah, we don't know how much information we absorb over our lifetime that goes into it.
There's also like lessons that your parents teach you. That's like, like shortcutting the learning process.
And think about this: when you started playing Starcraft 2, you probably went through the tutorial, or you had a friend who showed you how to play, or you had played another RTS game, like Command and Conquer.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And so you knew the mechanics of it before you even started. So you come at it with certain advantages that Alphastar kind of doesn't have. So there are some things like that. And so APM is kind of one of those things where if you look at the Starcraft 2 AI community, they've got some tournaments going on where it's bot versus bot, and the APMs are like 3,000 or whatever it is. And of course a good pro human will peak at, I don't know, potentially 300, maybe they'll go slightly higher, but a lot of that is spam clicking and rubbish and stuff like that. And one thing that happened when the Alphastar was playing is the APM got a little bit high. It peaked in a few areas, and I don't know the full details of what they had actually implemented there, and I have seen an article where Oriole, I think, says something along the lines of we might have had our thresholds too high and maybe we should have dropped them down a little bit, which is just a mechanic. They just got to change that. But understanding that select, act, deselect thing kind of contributes to it, and that they're potentially averaging the APM over a certain period of time, and maybe they chose the wrong period of time. That was one of the controversies that came out of it. And in the end, I'm not really sure that that's a huge deal. At least from my talks with the guys, my understanding is that APM isn't actually as critical as people think it is. And I've seen that from, for example, going back to Winter, the streamer, he does these challenges where he challenges himself to stay, I think, below, like, say, 100 APM. And he'll rank quite highly on the ladder with less than, say, 100 APM. I don't know the exact level he gets to, but he ranks quite high because it's not necessarily about your actions. It's about your strategy and how prepared you are for certain situations. It's your scouting and understanding and responding to what you're seeing, and how you manage your actions. So, not getting fixated on the army, but actually also then reinforcing and building and continuing to do things at home and making sure you're continuing to get lots of minerals and those sorts of things. And then, the DeepMind guys are like, well, actually actions aren't really everything. And one thing you can do to help your bot to begin with is actually act less often.
So what do you mean by that? Like act as in terms of take actions in, say, StarCraft?
Yeah, so so reinforcement learning, as you know, is state, action, reward, state kind of thing. It's that loop, and the game itself operates at 22.4 steps per second,
Right.
which I think at least in the ladder speed version of the game, and the default setting is to act once every 8 steps. So you're acting 2 to 3 times per second. But you can increase that, and I've actually got a bot that will play against itself, and I think I've got it at 48. So it acts every couple of seconds. It's potentially better depending on your bot. It's potentially better because the state is more likely to have changed significantly between each step. So you don't get this thing where the states only changed a tiny little bit.
Yeah, right. And maybe more to learn there then or something.
Yeah, and it's also not acting. It doesn't think that it has to act every single time. Like a human will stop and go, well, I don't need to do anything right now. So
I think, sorry to interject, but I think that like it all comes down to like we try to solve this problem using like all this prior knowledge we have as humans, and we try to apply these humans concepts to try to solve the problem. But then when you try break it apart as a machine learning problem, these things that weren't obvious become like you just mentioned before, taking less actions.
Yeah.
Become like, and that's counterintuitive, but that's one of the beautiful things about machine learning in general. It's like it provides these insights into like these complex problems. It's crazy. Yeah.
The hard part about machine learning or reinforcement learning, I think more specifically, if you do know the answer to the problem to some degree.
Answer being the reward, or answer?
Well, as a human, if you know StarCraft 2 and you see how it's played, you kind of know what you should do to play that game. At least you know what humans have figured out is the way to play that game.
Right.
And to some degree, that is how the game was designed, because obviously the guys at Blizzard are tweaking the game in response to how humans are playing the game to keep it balanced and that sort of thing. So coming to it with a predetermined idea of what it should produce can be a positive or a negative thing. There's been some things that have come out of it. One of the things that the DeepMind guys talk about is the collect mineral shards, that minigame that you talked about before. They worked out there's a thing called patrol, where ordinarily what that is you choose a unit and you say, I want it to go here and then here and then here, and then I want it to just continue to walk back and forth between those points. What they ran their agent over that collect mineral shards, and what the agent learned is if it used that patrol in a certain way, the units would spread a certain distance apart, and they would actually collect the mineral shards more quickly because they were always a certain distance apart. So because there's obviously a collection, like a radius around the mineral shard, so it would like choose the optimal path that would allow them to kind of collide with all of those.
That's crazy, because that's again machine learning, like distilling some kind of like higher structure in the system.
Well, a human's never going to. I can't imagine a human ever doing that. Although there are things that humans have figured out that are really tricky. Like one of the things that they say that that Alphastar did, one of the biggest things that people were surprised about is typically when you have workers on a base, it can tells you how many are optimal workers, which I think is normally like 16 or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
And then from there, each additional worker so that's 100% efficiency across all your workers. And then from there, each additional worker has less efficiency. So I don't know the exact numbers, but it might be like 90% efficient for the next one, and then 70%, and then like it drops off, I think, quite steeply after that. But the Alphastar bot learnt to have, say, I think it was like 24, which is like pretty much the maximum that you can have. So it's the least efficient.
So again, this is another. It learned some new structure that humans didn't used to use, and now if people tried using that new 24,
I haven't seen it
yeah,
in the wild.
Yeah, in the wild.
And it could just be a glitch.
Sure.
But people are like, wow, that's really interesting that it's gone with that strategy.
Yeah, right.
It's decided that it wants to have the maximum number and that's
resources.
It's actually enough. But, you know, one of the things that was really interesting, at least in the first rounds of when they first released, they didn't call it Alphastar back then, but the first rounds of Alphastar was they had the Build Marines mini game where the idea was to produce Marines. And it actually, it performed the worst at that mini game. So something where you would think it's really just a mathematical equation, like you do this and then you do this and then you do this, and there's an optimal way to produce the maximum number of Marines. It actually struggled to solve that problem efficiently.
Right.
Yeah, it can solve some other problems where maybe there's not as exact an answer. It can actually solve them better. So in this case, overproducing workers, was that the best strategy or was that a glitch? I don't think we know yet. You know, like I think people haven't really strayed from their strategy that they had before, which is that maybe you go up to 18 or 20, but maybe you don't go too far beyond that. So there's a lot of things that came out of Alphastar that are very interesting, that are like makes everybody's head spin, and you know. But I'm hoping there's going to be a next. I believe there will be quite a few more next versions, but I'm hoping the next version we get a little bit more insight into. Maybe some of those things will be corrected.
Yeah,
maybe
I can't wait to see what else they've got up their sleeve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see if it comes up with something completely different in terms of a build order or an approach that nobody had ever really thought of before, and that changes how people play the game, which I believe was something that happened with Go. When they played Go, I believe the humans they played against said, that was really tricky because when you play Go against a human, you kind of read the person. Maybe it's a little bit more like poker where you're reading the player, not the game. But then playing against something that had no human response, and it sort of, they went, okay, and it introduced a few strategies that they hadn't seen before. So now that those guys playing Go will actually approach the game slightly differently, and maybe the human can come up with an alternative that's
fundamentally changed the game, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, just to sort of wrap up our talk and discussion around Alphastar and Starcraft in general, like, do you think that we are reaching the limits of the techniques we know about now? Like, and maybe to make the question a bit more concrete, do you think there's any, like, I don't know what else you've seen in the community, but do you think there's anything else we can try, any other techniques that could lead to some more impressive results? Like, I for one don't think that the current Alphastar, I don't know, this is kind of controversial, but the current Alphastar system, like one of the things I know, like it's trained on one map, and I don't think they
in one race versus one race.
Yeah. So it's not generalizing. This problem of generalization hasn't really been solved, and I know this is something you wanted to talk about a little bit as well. So do you think like we're reaching the limits of our current techniques, and that this could lead to another AI winter? Or do you think there's still more on the horizon, still things we haven't tried yet?
In terms of Alphastar itself, I believe that the majority of the reason why they've trained it on just one race versus one race is partially simplicity, but also bugs. So, I think those bugs either have been solved or are being solved.
Yeah.
In terms of the single map, I think that's actually a very complex problem. Potentially they could do some form of transfer learning or something interesting like that, where when it plays on another map where it doesn't have confidence in an answer or an action, maybe they could choose to draw some information from the central brain or whatever for a period of time. Like it's very difficult because the specific coordinates are going to be built into that network, I would imagine anyway. Just the way that it's structured, it's easier to think about it as a fixed map and a fixed locations and that sort of stuff. So I think there's plenty more to be done with the technology that we have now.
Right now. Yeah. I think the same thing.
Yeah,
I think there's enough sort of different types of techniques on the table right now to do amazing things. It's just an engineering problem. That's something also I want to talk to you about soon.
Well, I think that the thing is, I believe
Connecting them all together.
Yeah, well, I believe the goal of DeepMind is to create general artificial intelligence, or artificial general intelligence, whichever way they put it. And this is not going to be it. However, this is probably one of the significant steps to, like, I think what we think of as neurons now, if you think of a neural network as being a neuron in a larger network of networks,
Right.
then I think you're approaching...
Yeah, sure.
Because think about all the different machine learning problems. You've got image recognition.
Yep. So you have like a neural network that deals with image recognition, and then another one that deals with planning or something.
Correct. And then you've got another one
talk
that...
to each other.
Yeah. I mean, some of the guys that I met at the AI workshop were dealing with... One of the guys there said he looks at Starcraft 2 as a conversation. And he was working with conversational intelligence
modeling
stuff, right? So he was like, I actually see this as a conversation. A battle is a conversation. Somebody
cool way
says
of viewing
something.
it,
It's like, wow, this is really cool.
It's a novel way of thinking about it.
So if we look at what's the trend of what's happened in machine learning, and like we were talking about ensembles and that sort of stuff before, I believe that what we're going to have is not a neural network, but a network of networks.
Agreed.
And a network of approaches, and that it will say, well, this is this type of problem and this is that type of problem, and it can work out. And then I think you're approaching that artificial general intelligence. But there's so much more stuff like spatial awareness and all these sorts of things and planning like that you talked about, which there's so much exploration to be done in all those sorts of areas that I sort of think...
I think like one of the things that DeepMind has been able to nail and execute really well is like the engineering side of things. So like that's also what really impressed me by Alphastar. Like if you there was like somebody did there's a blog post I saw where someone did a survey of all the new like papers within the rough that have come out in the last 2 years. So as of time of recording this, since 2017, and there were about like 8 new techniques that had never been used together, like engineered together. I think that's insane.
Well, that's the way humans work, right? We do something one way, and then from that we work out a better way. Like you see it in traditional engineering, like in engines, in cars.
Yeah, sure.
They're continually coming out.
Right.
You look at how much better.
But just being able to connect them, like these different techniques, I think
it's pretty interesting. I do believe that there are definitely a whole lot of techniques we haven't even thought of yet.
Yep.
I also think that some of the things that we consider to be difficult now are going to be easy. I believe, I think it's going to happen. I don't know when, but my theory is that, look at the hardware we've got now that is designed specifically for neural nets and that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, going down that path.
If you had a processor in a machine that was specifically, or even some software that was specifically for solving a particular task, let's say image recognition. Right now you have to go in, you create your own neural nets. Maybe you copy something that's already out there, but you're essentially going to create a new neural net, and you can do image recognition. If you just had a piece of your code that said, recognize this image, and it gave you the answer back, that changes everything in terms of engineering. And that might just be a call to a third. Right. These days, it'd probably be a call to a third-party API.
All these little modules are coming online that you can sort of just start plugging in. And
you're not thinking about it as artificial intelligence. You think about it as an API, just something you make a call and you say, here's my image, tell me what's in it. Oh, it's a cat.
Which kind of segues into what I also wanted to talk about, which is... So AI wins the thing. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, personally.
Well, let me talk about that just quickly. I think I've seen a lot of this where people are talking about an AI winter, and I think there's a partial truth to it, only because I think it's more about an investment bubble, kind of like the dot-com bubble, than I think it is about machine learning as a bubble. However, I don't think people quite realize just how much AI there is in everyday lives now.
Already, yeah.
Like your assistants that are here telling you can. I mean, I've got them here that I can tell them to turn the lights on and off, and they tell me when my flight's going to be delayed, when I'm going to the airport, and things like that, right? So, they filter out spam. The cops use it. The police use it to scan your number plate before they even pull you over. They know they've scanned your number plate with a computer and they've looked everything up.
And there's been some machine learning there that made that happen.
Exactly, right? So I don't think there's an AI winter in that sense, but I do think it might come off the boil as people realize
what can actually be done versus like the hype of what they think can be done.
Well, I think, and this is what my experience of trying to implement this stuff in the real world is data is hard to get. And businesses especially, which would really be the foundation of all this sort of stuff, progressing, I think, not everybody's Google with billions of dollars and they can fund DeepMind to not make any money for years and years and years so that one day they can build Skynet or whatever. So for the general population and general businesses, they have to progress towards that goal. And so I think there's a huge burst of energy and lots of people doing these degrees, but there's not necessarily the real world. And what I've seen and what people I've spoken to are doing this in the real world. At the moment, people have just started to get onto the proof of concept train. Businesses are going, well, we want to look at this artificial intelligence thing, but do us a proof of concept that we can actually do it, which is a very smart approach, I think. But then they're only just getting to the point where they're considering about productionalizing, so whatever they've put together. And I think part of that is when AI goes wrong, it can go very wrong. Like when you have a self-driving car and it makes the wrong decision, it can be deadly. We've seen that. So I think a lot of businesses, let's say you've got some artificial intelligence, a little bit like maybe what Amazon does with its dynamic pricing. And, Bob's store down the road here goes and implements dynamic pricing and next minute he's undercharging and losing money on every sale and people are ordering hundreds of thousands of everything and he's goes out of business because he can't do it. Or at least it just costs him a whole bunch of headache to try and, fix it all up. Until that there's a mitigation for that downside.
I think again, it's going to be a shrinking between what people think it's capable of to what it can actually do. And then I think the market's going to focus on what it can do. And maybe that will expand over time as these algorithms and systems become more powerful.
I think if you do image recognition right now, that's an easy thing.
There's a million applications. I read another blog post that was from 2014 or something when they just sort of solved or got machine vision working.
Yep.
That this is going to be $1 trillion industry. Think of all the different applications you can make now that computers and machines can see.
And yet on the other side of that, we see San Francisco has banned the government from implementing facial recognition. Without some sort of prior approval.
Yeah, it's all interesting to see how this stuff is going to play out. I think, where you have China taking the opposite approach. We'll see.
It's also potentially not economically viable right now. Like the company that I used to work for was dealing with, say, warehouse management was one of the things that they dealt with. And when you look at how primitive warehouse management is, maybe in Australia, but also in many parts of the world, I would say. It's not economically viable for them to do what's necessary to get the data into the system in order to support an artificial intelligence that could then help their business.
Right.
Some businesses, it's economical to just go and chuck a bunch of boxes on a shelf and just know where they are.
Sure.
So having something that optimizes that and
depends
requires
on your
them,
scale and a whole bunch of other factors. Yeah.
I see it even now in a lot of the businesses I've worked with. They're like, oh, we want to automatically calculate shipping. And you're like, okay, cool. So what you're going to have to do is measure the length, width, and height of every single item that you're potentially shipping so that you can put a cubic value in and it'll calculate what you're shipping and how much it's going to cost. And they're like, oh, we can't do that because we do 30,000 different product lines. How are we going to measure every single one, and so on and so on? And that'll be solved by the
More sophisticated systems.
Well, the manufacturer will supply that information to, say the retailers, and the retailer is then able to automatically load that into their system. But these things take years and years and years to sort of flow through. So,
what do you think about like merging? So you have got an extensive software dev background.
Yep.
What do you think about the merging of, say, like, I don't know if you want to, what you want to call them, data science / machine learning engineer skill sets, sort of strapping those on to the current dev stack that like people learn in, say, university now in a 4-year comp sci degree or whatever?
I think to some degree it's inevitable. There's a couple of areas there.
How do you think that's going to change? Yeah.
I think some things won't change. Like the biggest thing I see probably not changing is going to be user interface design and a few things like that. That hasn't really changed. Like, I haven't seen that change in the industry probably almost in the whole time I've been developing. So, almost 20 years. Of course, there have been advancements and improvements, and people understand the user interface a lot more now than they used to, and it continues to evolve as we can now swipe on a phone where we couldn't do that before. That changes everything. So there are areas like that where maybe machine learning will help, maybe it won't. Maybe machine learning can do some A/B testing or whatever it happens to be. That seems like a tricky one, just given the type of change, like the type of things it has to understand. But then there's machine learning kicking into things like server management. For example, using machine learning to detect viruses or hacking attempts or system failures or, say, potential system failures. I can see areas where that industry of, say, DevOps or server management and that sort of thing will be significantly impacted by the fact that a piece of software can scan everything that's going on and potentially alert things and deal with things automatically. And instead of having to have a human sitting there watch things or responding to things, it can probably solve a lot of those things automatically. It may just be that the human has to configure that.
But do you think you'll have to, like, if people coming through university now, do you think they're going to have to, the machine learning element will be sort of merged as part of the curriculum?
I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
I think it will be essential in software development. However, like I was saying before, if it evolves into an API, that's probably the simplest form of somebody being able to use machine learning without really understanding it. So there are kind of going to be two parts. There's going to be the people who are developing the machine learning and providing those APIs, and projects like Alphastar have people like Timo who are the engineers who are kind of connecting the brainy guys with all the data science to the real world with all the engineering and the software, and that actually plugs all the pieces together. And then there are going to be people who have no idea about machine learning, but they want to do speech recognition on a sound file, and they just know they send it to this API and it gives them the text back.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So,
yeah, sure.
And I think machine learning is always going to be interesting and intriguing, but it's always going to take people who have a certain level of ability to understand the problem that they're solving. My knowledge of software engineers is they cover a very broad spectrum of abilities, and there's a market for almost every ability, but and some abilities are in more demand at different times than others. So,
can you give some examples of those?
Example would be, say, as a PHP developer, you can still make quite a lot of money building WordPress sites or Magento plugins, which to anyone who's considers himself to be a software engineer, seems like very easy, mundane work. But actually you can make quite a lot of money out of that because there's quite a lot of demand for that sort of stuff. And quite often that's done through agencies, and those agencies charge customers quite a lot of money. So there's a lot of markup and so on and so on. So a lot of people who I've been responsible for hiring have said, I don't want to work on that stuff, even though I could make a lot of money. I want to work on something interesting. And I kind of put myself in that boat of I'll trade a little bit of money for interesting pleas. However, there is kind of a cap to how much you can earn no matter what you're doing. So certain personalities will be drawn to do something more interesting. And some people just want a job and want to get paid, and that's cool
Right.
too. And they're not really showing up because they're passionate about this. They're not the people who are going to be up until 3 o'clock in the morning programming something. And that's fine. There's a place for them, and there's an economy there for that. What I think is there's a section of those people who are going to want to understand how things work underneath. And that's where I've always gravitated towards.
Cool.
You know, people who will use a programming framework, but will also understand how the framework works underneath, and potentially finds problems with the framework and is able to contribute to that open source framework with a fix, an improvement, that kind of thing.
Cool. Well, I think this is a great place to wrap it up. Is there anything you'd like to reach out to, or where can people find you on, say, Medium or?
Yeah, so I'm on Medium, medium.com/@skjb. You can also join the Starcraft 2 AI chat on Discord. That's fairly busy. That's probably the best place to go. When you jump in there, you can talk to me. You can talk to Timo from DeepMind. You can talk to the guys who run the SC2 AI ladder tournament. There's quite a few other people in there who are kind of contributing and helping, and some are doing machine learning, some are doing just scripted bots that have fixed build orders and that kind of thing. So it's a very active community, and lots of people are helping out, and lots of stuff's going on.
Cool. Yeah, man. Steve, it's been a pleasure, mate.
Cheers. Been good to do.
And let's catch up next time, eh?
Sounds good.
Yeah, cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Hi everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed that podcast. If you did, please feel free to like, click, or subscribe, as that would really, really help us out. Cheers, and see you guys next time.